unfortunately, it's so sad. That's what we have in this province. We have people who manage the decline. We have careerists, and we don't have people with great depth or gravitas. We don't have disruptors, and we are living in such tumultuous times. These times demand a disruptor.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. Richard, there are social conservatives and there are fiscal conservatives, but this is not a fiscal conservative government either. It's a record debt, a record deficit. It makes the McGuinty-Wynne people look like spendthrifts. So I'm trying to see the upside in a PC government if you lean conservative.
Well, there is none. There is none. Just the debt now. What is it approaching $500 billion? The provincial
With a
debt.
T.
$500 billion. We have the largest sub-sovereign debt in the world, greater than California even. That's the mess that we're in. That the interest on that is $1 billion a month. You can build a state-of-the-art hospital for $1 billion. We could build a new hospital every month in this province, but we're burning the money.
Unbelievable. And the perverse irony here is this man used to subscribe to one of the best political slogans of the early 21st century. I would argue him and his brother both ran on it. Respect for taxpayers. Can you imagine? Richard, we're going to take a little break. Let's hear Doug Ford's victory speech, and then we'll weigh in with a little analysis after he's done. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Boy, what a crowd. Thank you so much. And what a night. And what a result. Thank you so much. Together we have made history. Together we have secured a strong, historic third majority mandate. A mandate to protect Ontario from the bottom of my heart. I thank you for being here, for sharing this incredible moment with me. To the thousands of volunteers right across this province who braved the cold, who knocked on over 2 million doors, tonight belongs to you. Thank you. I want to begin by thanking Carla and my daughters for your endless support. I couldn't do this without you. I also want to thank Mart Stiles, Bonnie Crombie, Mike Schreiner, and every single person who put their name on a ballot. We can disagree on policy, but there's no question at all. Each one of them loves our province, and each one of them loves Canada, the greatest country on earth. Democracy only works if people are willing to step up and step forward. Our province is stronger because of your decision to do so, so I want to thank all the candidates.
Absolutely.
During my time in office, I hope I've proven I will work with anyone, I will work with everyone to get things done. Now, as we stare down the threat of Donald Trump's tariffs, I will continue to do just that. I will work with every level of government and every political stripe, because fighting back against Donald Trump, standing up for Canada, it will take a full Team Ontario effort. It will take a full Team Canada effort. Friends, over the last 7 years, we've made so much progress together. Over 1 million more people are working today than when we were elected in 2018. We've attracted over $70 billion in new investments into our economy, in new auto and battery plants, in our manufacturing sector, in new life science facilities, in Ontario's growing tech sector. Now together, we have to fight hard to protect our progress. This election, we ask the people for a mandate, a strong mandate that outlives and outlasts the Trump administration. and mandate to do whatever it takes to protect Ontario. Well, friends, the people have spoken. They're ready to stand up for Canada. This election, we asked the people for a mandate to make Ontario the most competitive place in the G7 to invest, create jobs, and do business. The people said yes. We asked the people for a mandate to unleash the awesome economic potential of the Ring of Fire. The people said yes. We asked the people for a mandate to build up our economy by tearing down internal trade barriers, and the people said yes. We asked the people for a mandate to cut rates.
Wow. Oh, Richard, so much to unpack there. Let me give you a quick analysis, and then I want to hear, of course, what you have to say. He was speaking about, having a mandate to exploit the Ring of Fire. That's that, mining project in Northern Ontario full of precious metals. He was promising that in 2018. Ring of Fire. That was the first time I heard Ring of Fire. Talking about dismantling trade barriers. Are you kidding me? This has been around twas ever thus. It's easier for me to import a case of wine from France than British Columbia. Over the last 7 years, made so much progress. And then he goes on to talk about the EV battery plant investments. Those are in the tens of billions of dollars. Richard, I personally think these are white elephants in the making. Building batteries for expensive cars that the vast majority of car buyers do not want or cannot afford. So that has disaster written all over it. Here's another nugget. Democracy only works when people step up. To your point, 27%, not even 1/3 stepped up. So how can you call that democracy in action? And at the very beginning, he wanted to thank every single person who put their name on the ballot. Not Bobby Ann Brady, not the independent candidate who used to be with the PCs. He has a vendetta against her. He actually called her out at Queen's Park last year, Richard, saying, we're going to make you unemployed. Gee, not so job friendly when it comes to a personal grudge, which is inexplicable. I mean, one independent, when you have a supermajority, it's insane. Richard, a lot of these things, when you analyze what he just said there in those 4 or 5 minutes, it doesn't add up to me. Your thoughts?
He's going to make this the most competitive jurisdiction in the G7. It is to laugh. It is to laugh. $600 billion have fled this country, not all of it from Ontario, but during the Trudeau years. This is so uncompetitive a jurisdiction because of our electricity rates and so forth, that we've got to bribe Volkswagen to build these plants. And as you say, white elephants. I guarantee you in 5 years, these structures will all be giant daycare centers or casinos.
Yeah,
he bet on the wrong horse, and that was evident at the time when that money was committed. Volkswagen in Europe had already scaled down sales and production of electric vehicles. It's dead in the water. Yep. It's going to be that's going to come back to haunt him. Or it should, if there's any justice. You have tactical error.
You often have a great guest on your radio program, Dan McTeague, a Liberal MP of 18 years. No, don't crucify me, folks. Dan McTeague was a classical Liberal, not this current, Marxist type of Liberal we have here. But he used to be with Toyota Motor Company, and we did a story recently about these EVs, Richard. And Toyota Motor Company, given that they're the biggest and most profitable automotive company in the world, I think they know a thing or two about making cars. They don't have any EVs. They have one plug-in hybrid, one of the Prius models. But Dan was saying that they're waiting it out because there's a next generation solid state battery. It's going to be lighter. The charge times are less. You're going to get way, way more range. So it's almost as though we're investing in plants making VHS tapes when the DVD is on the horizon. That's what makes me think this has all to do with virtue signaling and not any kind of return on investment. Your thoughts?
Well, I agree with you. He's not reading the room. He's not looking at what's happening in the rest of the world. The mandates are not going to be around in this country for very long.
Yeah.
I think either Polyev will get rid of them, and if it happens to be Mark Carney, God forfend, I think he'll probably get rid of them as well. I don't see electric vehicles, being a driver in this economy. The top 5 vehicles remain gas-powered SUVs and minivans.
Yeah.
And it'll remain that way for the foreseeable future. It's just a horrific blunder that this province has made,
especially with our climate. And that's a whole other story. It's also funny. He said that we want to have a mandate in Ontario that will outlive the Trump administration. What about outliving the J.D. Vance administration? Because the Democrats look so rudderless right now. It looks like they did not learn any lessons about why Trump won last November. So, again, it speaks to your point. So many countries in the world, they're getting away from wokeism. They're getting away from cancel culture. They're getting away from virtue signaling bad investments. And yet here, Doug Ford looks at the Trump template as a negative thing.
Populist conservatism is the trend of the future. I mean, it's happening now in Europe. It's going to sweep the world. And again, we will be left behind. Although maybe we can take some solace in the fact that Doug Ford really doesn't have any principles. And if he finds it at some point convenient, maybe to embrace populism, conservatism, maybe he will. These are my principles, and if you don't like them, I have others.
Yeah. And you know what, Richard? I'm going to give you a true story here. Is Doug Ford calling the shots, or are there puppet masters behind the scenes? And Doug Ford is just so giddy still, 7 years later, from going from a wannabe mayor in a city in Ontario to the premier of Ontario, that he'll do anything they darn well please. I reversed the clock to 2017. In this very room, I had Doug Ford come in for an interview, very cordial interview. And after it was done, he got up and he looked around and he said, Dave, I'm thinking back in the days of Sun News. Remember Ford Nation? Remember that show we did? I said, Doug, how could we ever forget? He said, you know what? Why don't we do a weekly Ford Nation show? I said, Doug, I'll be your co-host. You name the time, the day, we'll do it. I went in, told Ezra about it. I've never seen Ezra so happy in all his life. That was September 2017. And went into October, November. My calls, my texts aren't being returned. And finally, I caught up with Doug Ford at a press conference. This is when he still had ambitions to be mayor. And he was speaking out against the King Street right-of-way streetcar. And I attended it and I asked my question. Then when it was all over, I went up to him politely and I said, Doug, I hate to be a nag, but I'm not hearing from you about this show. And my boss, Ezra, he wants to get on this ASAP. And Doug Ford said to me, Richard, he said, Dave, if it was up to me, I would do the show tomorrow. But Dave, you have to understand, it's the team, Dave. The team doesn't think it's the right fit. I think that was a precursor to tell you all you need to know about Doug Ford. He's not his own man. Rob Ford was his own man. Donald Trump is his own man. They're not beholden to a team. I think Doug Ford is.
Well, that explains a lot. It explains why this is really a radical progressive party.
Yeah.
I mean, having to say conservative in the same sentence as this, I choke on that. It's a radical progressive party. There is nothing conservative, not fiscally conservative, not socially conservative, not even centrist. Yeah. This is not even a centrist party. Makes me pine for the days of Dalton McGuinty by comparison.
And, speaking of a liberal premier, there was a lot of speculation. I know you're old enough to remember 1990, Richard, under David Peterson, a majority liberal government. went to the polls early. Kind of eerie circumstances. There was some scandal with Ford. It's the Green Belt with Peterson.
Patty Starr. It was the Patty Starr
Patty
scandal.
Starr. That's right.
Yeah.
That's it.
$160,000 in inappropriate campaign. I mean, imagine today. That's just doing business.
That's what you find in the couch
Yeah.
at Queen's Park in terms of change. But I can tell you back then, Richard, not even the elite polling companies, not even the NDP itself dreamed that when Ontarians woke up the next day, there was an NDP government under Bob Rae. So it is fraught with danger because the electorate was really pissed off. They either voted for another party or they didn't come out to vote, not even thinking that, cumulatively the NDP would get enough votes to be the one-hit wonder that it was. Clearly that didn't happen. It looks like, positioning himself as Captain Canada and concentrating on the Trump factor paid dividends.
No question. I guess if you have to give him credit for anything, he recognized that Trump derangement syndrome is a rich vein to be mined in this province and in this country and in the Greater Toronto area in particular. Despite all you were pointing out earlier that Donald Trump really has held up a mirror to Canada. And now, as you say, for the first time, we're talking about, or maybe it was Harrison Faulkner, we're talking about border security. We're talking about building pipelines across this country. We can thank Donald Trump for that.
We can. And these are indeed good things. And I think you'll also see the federal government ponying up our NATO commitment funding, which Trudeau promised to get in place by 2032. Trump's not going to stand for that. Indeed. Overall, this election, I call it unwanted. I call it unneeded. I say it's bogus that Doug Ford needed a mandate. He had a mandate. He had a majority government and 18 months, which is an eternity in politics, Richard. When you look back at this very short, wintry election campaign, are there any things that stand out to you?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. It will be forgotten. People will look back. They won't look back. They'll try to remember, wait a minute, did we have an election in 2025? There's nothing. There was no need for it. It was a cynical ploy. That's reflected in the abysmal turnout. Doug Ford should be embarrassed by that. He's got his mandate, 12%. That's his mandate. Yeah. He's going to spend us into oblivion like he did during COVID. We'll have nothing to show for it. Yeah. For 12% of the people spoke for Doug Ford. 12%.
And Richard, the proof is in the pudding or the cherry cheesecake, as the case may be. I predicted correctly this would be the lowest turnout in Ontario election history. The last lowest turnout was 2022, 44%. But saying that, my friend, I never dreamed 27%. I never dreamed it would be below a third. Is that just voter apathy? Is it the weather? I mean, what is it?
I guess if you're standing in line at the food bank, getting out to cast your ballot is kind of low priority. Or I don't know if you're in a park under a tarp somewhere. Yeah. People are just struggling. They're struggling. This is not a high priority. They're trying to keep the lights on. They're trying to put food on the table.
And, Richard, that's a very good point, too, because Harrison Faulkner correctly said that, as with all elections, the primary question comes down to, are you better off today than you were blank number of years ago? In this case, 7 years ago, 2018. And, Richard, unless you invested in pharmaceutical stocks, I would argue that, no, the vast majority are not better off. Last week, I went to a Pierre Poilievre press conference. It was a brilliant press conference. He had it at a food bank in West End, Toronto. This one food bank, Richard, in 2020 had serviced on a regular basis 10,000 clients, okay? Mm-hmm. Today, 70,000 clients. One food bank, right? By the way, coincidentally, Mark Carney signed on as the financial advisor to Blackface in 2020. So how's that working for us? So how was this query lost in this election? Are you better off today than you were 7 years ago? Because people in my circle, they're struggling, Richard.
Well, there are two types of leaders. There are those who simply manage the decline, and then you have disruptors. Donald Trump is a disruptor. I think Danielle Smith out in Alberta is a bit of a disruptor. Doug Ford is a manage the decline.
Yeah.
And so are our opposition leaders, so are most of the MPPs that we have at Queen's Park. It's really a disservice to Ontarians that this is what we have. These are not our best and our brightest by any stretch. They are here to manage the decline, and that's what they're doing.
Speaking of Mark Carney, Richard, I was speaking with my beloved colleague Sheila Gunn-Reid the other day when we were doing the afternoon live stream, and I found it very odd that just 48 hours before the provincial election, Bonnie Crombie would come out and endorse Mark Carney. I thought maybe better wait until after the election. Maybe there's a lot of people that might like Bonnie Crombie as a provincial Liberal, but are scared of Mark Carney, especially with him saying, I'll enact the Emergencies Act to get my mandate done here on the third anniversary of the brutal takedown of the trucker convoy. And Sheila, I thought, had a brilliant point. No. She's saying this right now because when she doesn't win on Thursday, she'll be fishing for a federal riding to run in, and she wants to get on the good side of someone who looks like he's going to be coronated as leader. Do you think that was what was behind it?
I was going to say maybe she saw some internal polling and realized that she wasn't going to pull this one out. She wasn't going to win the seat. I would expect her probably to resign in the next few days.
Interesting. Okay.
And yeah, any port in a storm. Thus is always the way with careerists.
Yes.
Right. And that's what she is. She's a careerist. And that's, unfortunately, it's so sad. That's what we have in this province. We have people who manage the decline. We have careerists, and we don't have people with great depth or gravitas. We don't have disruptors, and we are living in such tumultuous times. These times demand a disruptor.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. Richard, it was a delight having you in with your analysis. Let's talk about where people can hear you. I'm a big fan of yours, as you know. We have Saga 960.
That's right.
People can also hear Mark Petroni and Jack Berkovitz there. You've got a real stellar cast that you're building on that little independent radio station. And I believe you have a podcast too, don't you?
Well, the show airs 4 to 6 p.m. on Saga 960, Saga as in Mississauga,
Yeah.
SAUGA 960am.ca. You can stream it online.
Okay.
The show is also available as a podcast, The Richard Syrett Show, wherever you find your podcast. And we've launched a brand new YouTube channel at Richard Syrett 64.
Oh.
And my monologues are posted there, and just posted an interview I did with Ruby Dalla, and there's a Max Bernier interview up there, Naomi Wolf. So YouTube at Richard Syrett 64.
Well, Richard, like I said, you've been hitting it out of the park lately. So, folks, please tune in. Find out what Richard has to say. His monologues are absolutely fantastic. And Richard, I want to thank you for coming down all the way from Thornhill to North Toronto at nighttime when traffic actually moves here. And I'll be sure to follow you on Saga 960. And any predictions as a parting question on where Doug Ford is going to take us?
Into oblivion.
Jeez, I'm sorry I asked. Richard, thanks so much
All
again. Right. Okay, thank you.
Oh, hi, it's Ezra Levant here in Toronto with an important message because we need your help. Independent journalism in Canada is under attack. Government censors, big tech deplatformers, and the dying legacy media are all working together to maintain exclusive control on the information you receive. They don't want you to hear other voices like ours, and they really don't want you to be informed and to think for yourself. That's why the work we do here at Rebel News is so important. Our on-the-ground reporting, independent news shows, and special content you won't find anywhere else. It's all designed to give you trustworthy information and alternative viewpoints so you can decide for yourself. We don't get government money, and we are not owned by some big global conglomerate. We're funded by people just like you, so please support independent journalism and help us continue our work by subscribing and becoming a Rebel News Plus member today, right here on the page. Go to rebelnewsplus.com.